Welcome to Below the Line, where we talk about working in Hollywood from the crew perspective. My name is Skid. I'm a former assistant director and your host.
Quiet on the set.
Today we're talking about Gen V, the Amazon Prime superhero satire set in the world of The Boys, which itself is currently on hiatus between seasons 3 and 4. Gen V wrapped its first 8-episode season last month, and my guest today is film editor Maura Corey. Maura, welcome to Below the Line.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
I am glad you're here, excited to talk about this show. And we're going to be joined in the co-host chair this week by returning guest Gianni Damaia, host of the Bad Movies podcast and friend of the show. Gianni, nice to see you again.
It is always a pleasure, Skid. Thank you for having me back and to talk about comic book stuff. This is super exciting. Thank you.
Well, we're going to kick it off with a warning for listeners. Today's conversation will contain spoilers. But Maura, I want to start with talking a little bit more about this universe where Gen V is set. It expands on The Boys with the introduction of the Godolphin University, where superhero teenagers train their powers. But as we mentioned earlier, The Boys has 3 seasons under its belt. And in doing so, there's a certain tone and style to the show. I'm curious about how that influences the editing on Gen V.
Well, it influenced the editing on Gen V quite a bit, as we wanted to make sure that there was continuity between The Boys and Gen V. And as a franchise, to give it the same, it was very important for it to have the same feeling, because we are expanding on this idea of, we're widening the world of The Boys by taking it outside of just the city. Now we're into the larger superhero community at large. So we very much were attentive to music styles, cutting styles, making sure that we were true to superpower styles, because we introduced new characters, new superheroes, new powers, and focusing on this new generation of superheroes that were all shot up with Compound V.
But as a follow-up, is there anything specifically from an editing approach that you do differently for Gen V to separate it from the mothership, if you will? Or again, is that first goal just to sort of integrate fully?
It was definitely thought that we wanted to make this show a independent space. Like, we wanted it to have its own voice. And most of that had to do with the fact that we were zeroing in on this younger generation. So a lot of it is about character building, about drama building, and making sure that this college, the Godolphin University space, was understood. Because The Boys, you have 7 superheroes and a larger community. Here we have a larger community of superheroes and a smaller human component. So stylistically, we wanted to keep that same feeling of fast cutting with the fighting, making sure that the comedy landed, making sure the drama moments landed. But we also wanted to give it this voice. Our main character is female. So we wanted to make sure that female issues were coming through, but also not losing the satire and what makes The Boys so phenomenal and for lack of a better word, tasty, just wanting it to. But and because this is a different show, we wanted our characters to have their own voice.
You touched on something I think that's super important about Gen V in particular, because the main character is female, but it's even deeper because her core trauma is literally associated to one of the most important, sort of female moments in her life when she gets her first period, and that's tied so deeply to her powers. And so, are there things in Gen V that you had to be particularly attentive to? For example, you have the character of Sam, who's obviously gone through quite a lot. Was it crucial to kind of focus and make sure this moment needs to feel really empathetic, as opposed to, he's not just violently wailing away and being scary.
Great point.
It has to be someone that's emotional too.
That is a great question. I think one of the things that we have different than The Boys is you have sympathy for the superheroes versus animosity towards the superheroes. So these kids are going through all of these life changes I don't know where the story's going, but they're clearly unaware of the dangers of Vought. So we definitely wanted to make sure that Sam as a character, although violent, we understood the trauma, that Marie's trauma. I mean, if you go through the whole series, it's all about stepping into their trauma and feeling what they're feeling. You've seen the whole series, right? So like,
yes,
yeah.
We're all,
So and then
all
and
eight
then
we can
episodes.
talk about that, right?
Once again,
I'm sorry.
spoilers are possible on this show, folks. So if
yeah.
you haven't watched them all, you need to check in.
I'm so sorry. That was a silly question. So yeah, we wanted to very much make sure that the characters were felt and we were seeing it through these kids' eyes because they are still in that stage of thinking they can do good. They're stepping into the school thinking this is my chance to be a hero. You see it with Emma, you see it with Marie, you even see it with Kate in the finale. She's like, I'm trying to save you.
Right.
And we wanted to make sure that there wasn't this, that we understood that maybe her way, although not the best approach because she's had so much trauma,
Right.
but understanding where this wanting to burn it down comes from because of how her story unfolded.
And how that ties so deftly into the boys, because of course you have that final reveal with Homelander sort of showing up. And okay, so full disclosure, my brother is the massive boys fan. Like, I mean, I watch the show and I love Gen V, but my brother is like the biggest, like he reads all the comics and he was like, you gotta ask like about Homelander. You gotta ask about the exploding penis, which I'm sure we'll get to or whatever. But I mean,
we like to, just to be fair, we called it in the office, we called it the cock explosion.
The cock explosion.
All right, we'll make a note on that.
There you go. That's the title of the episode, I think now. So it takes everything away. But I mean, was there a particular moment in the editing room where, okay, this Homelander's here, we have to really focus up on this moment in particular. This has to be like the ball has dropped, this is the moment that Gen V, everybody's going to be talking about.
Right. So we were very, very, very focused on the fact that Gen V was going to hand off a plot point to the boys. So Homelander's landing and doing his soup superiority thing, which personally for me was so much fun to cut because the actor who plays Homelander is so amazing.
Yeah.
And he was, I mean, the dailies were money throughout the whole thing. It was like, embarrassment.
Like, I think he has 2 lines and he eats.
I know, but it was so bad.
Oh my God.
You just relished it. It was so good. The thing that's so great about him, you never know where he's going to turn his anger. So Marie walks up and that moment we wanted to make sure that it's like, woo, what's he going to do? Is he going to embrace this person we've been following? Or I don't know. How is he going to save the day? And, he did his awesome Homelander thing and didn't,
Was it always designed that it cuts there, or was there supposed to be more of a follow-up with the other characters?
That's a great question. No, it was designed to cut when she got blasted. The subsequent news thing, we've decided we needed more Homelander to watch that. It was done more of in a solo thing, but we thought having him present and to see the look of smirk on his face and kind of relishing in this spin that he did, that there was the new Guardians of Godolkin who, were the people trying to kill humans. So that's kind of where we found it in the editing room when we found, a Homelander's so juicy right here. We should even just, because we're handing the football off, make sure that we had his presence very felt.
Maura, something you said about this show where we empathize with the young heroes, it brings up an interesting point. Like your brother, Gianni, I am actually familiar with the comic books. And the whole Godolkin storyline in the comic books is really embedded into the boys' story. And they're not very sympathetic. It's really just like one chapter of this ongoing conflict with superheroes and sort of the satire, parody, the whole bit. But by removing it and taking it separately, I think there is this opportunity for a different approach that even wasn't in the comic book material. And I'm curious at what stage the sort of comic book material is left behind, or are there influences from the original books that carry through to your work?
That's a great question. And personally for me, I have no idea. That's more of a writer's room conversation. For what the showrunners Michelle Zakis, Tara Butters, and Eric Kripke have done this great job of not only, I think, integrating a lot of the comic book stuff, but also making it really palatable to a new medium and kind of putting their own spin on it. And, that's what's exciting about doing shows with creative showrunners is, we had The Boys where the Soups were unlikable, and now this one flipped it on its head. It's almost like they flipped it again. I don't know. It's exciting. It's exciting to work with people.
Opportunity they have to build out this world and really explore these people gives new breath to the kind of material. So that's very interesting. I did actually, I think, kind of in a similar vein, because I was curious, but so I'll phrase the question like this. So I think there's two major scenes from the episodes that you edited that focus on a character dynamic that was, I think, my personal favorite character dynamic in the show, which was the sort of Emma-Sam relationship and how that's kind of like foundationally built. There's this brilliant, and I think like very subtle sort of scene that happens at the beginning of, I believe, the 4th episode, where he's essentially saved her after she's, sort of inadvertently or advertently saved him from sort of the however you want to describe it, the hospital or the sort of experimental
the woods.
The woods, right. And so I think in the way it's framed, a lot of the initial sort of conversation takes place with mostly like wide shots where they're both in frame, and you can see Emma's, the little Emma, and him sort of like purveying over her as like almost a protector. And then it's not until she actually starts to reveal this sort of lie that she had told about his brother being alive that it cuts into more close-ups on Emma specifically, and then Sam sort of independent of her. And I don't know if this was like a deliberate choice, but the way I interpreted it as a viewer was that it gave me some inherent sense of tension. Like, I don't know how this person's going to react, and the violent outburst could be directed at Emma, who's a character that we're already sort of affectionate for. And I guess, of course, all of it could just be, at the end of the day, you could just as easily say that, oh yeah, it's just budgetary. Like, it's hard to have two people in frame and we're compositing someone small the whole time. But it seemed very intentional, and I was curious, how much of your work as an editor do you find that in Gen V in particular, do you find that you're able to sort of dictate the visual narrative versus how much of it is just sublimely sort of shot listed like that to give that exact sort of experience?
Okay, that's a great question. It is absolutely on purpose we built it that way. It is absolutely it's a combination of all elements that make editing a beautiful art form, in my opinion. It is, the actors were their chemistry was just phenomenal. The actors did a great job with their lines. The way they shot it, because Emma was on green screen for most of it, she was there in the room reading the lines with him. So they were in the same space. So again, they reacted to each other emotionally. They were a great pairing. Not only that scene, but the scene where they're in the finale, when they're in the theater,
the big
same
argument
thing.
Yeah,
it was almost, that scene almost edited itself. I mean, the performances were just dropped dead amazing. In fact, I don't think we did a ton of notes on that scene. Like, my first cut is pretty close to what we have. But the first scene in scene 4, where you're talking with Emma and Sam in the drive-through, it is very important that we start the scene with them in this wide space so you can see how tiny she really is to him. I mean, she's ant size and he looks huge. And creating their emotional dynamic and the timing between where he goes, no, we got to find Luke. And she just pauses and turns, and you see the look on her face of making that decision. So you being close in there, you want to be intimate with what Emma has going on, because you can see the wheels turning. So that's why the close-up is so strong. And then when we cut to Sam thinking about it, you want to be, again, in this close framing so you can see him process this. And again, the tension is specifically built to say, what is he going to do? Because it's been established at this point that he has violent tendencies, that he's got obvious, I think they had described as schizophrenic. And that's also why we intercut when he did this, he smashes a bunch of stuff. We cut her to being scared, but not so scared that she wouldn't, like, she wasn't so scared that she was pushed away from him. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Because she could see the turmoil in him and his outburst. She then drops down, and again, we have this wide shot where she falls into frame, and then we stayed in that so she could walk towards this huge hulking frame. Again, it's composited. And then when she gets up and she goes, Sam, I'm never going to leave you. Her voice is soft. She's super tiny. And then we get really close on his face. We go, you're going to leave me. That's the emotional connection we have between these two. No matter what, he's huge, she's small, but there's still this connection between the two characters. And you get that when you can hold a close up. And honestly, if the actors were so good, to be able to hold a close up like that is great. When you end on silence and you can just read somebody's face, it's a sign of amazing acting. So,
well, yeah, but it's just a perfect example of, this sort of collaborative art form where each piece just complements the other, because the visual language of that edit tells that story exactly in the way as you're describing it, just as the actors tell that story exactly in the way you're describing it, just as the way.
So whenever I approach a scene, it's performance first to see what how the actors are going to inform the scene, because they, ultimately I'm shaping their performances. So I want their best thing on the table. So if their best thing on the table is only the close-ups, then it's like, well, that's a little different idea. But when you have such an amazing, like the director had such an amazing vision on this, to be like, we want to see the difference in these sizes. Even the whole line where he goes, did you grow? You look a little bigger. She goes, I think I ate some of his ear. She was in the script. She was even tinier. And he's like, oh, she needs to be a tad bit bigger just so we can see her on that table. So there was a little bit of that informed, and she's the actress is just standing in a room with like nothing behind her. I mean, the way they managed to even get the eye lines beautiful. It was fun to do.
Yeah,
but covered in blood and goop, though. I'm sure that was
the best.
real. Like, that's a full-sized blood and goop, even though
There's
she's supposed to be very small.
They do a lot of practical stuff, the practical effects, which I just think is the bee's knees. I just love it. I mean, you saw Emma when she's dangling from the dude's penis, and that thing was built. Somebody built that. Like, this is pretty good.
And the sound design in that scene, I think, is what so much.
Oh yeah.
It just like you. As soon as she oh man,
you just hear the slap. I know.
Right. But yeah, that slap. You're like, yep, that's real.
So, Maura, going back to something that Gianni alluded to, he talked about the episodes that you edited. You were the lead picture editor for episodes 4 and 8. Can you talk to us about what that means in terms of the full editing team with your focus on those episodes specifically?
So, it breaks down, especially with television, that you have a number of editors working on one project. So, I mean, every show works differently. This one specifically, we had quite a few based on schedule and need. So I basically am the only editor on my episode. So it started with me, it ended with me. And I have an assistant editor, Jen Rosenthal, who did a lot of the temp sound design and a lot of the temp. She was amazing. She's my partner in crime. Let's put it that way. And a relationship between an editor and assistant is such a team. I credit a lot of my success to how much she supports me. And then I had a fantastic VFX editor who would provide me with temp elements, because, for instance, in episode 4, there was that end fight scene with all the blood lassos and all. I'm really proud of episode 4 at the end, especially because that's the first time you actually see everybody kind of using their powers, and that's when we reveal Emma can also get huge. So there was a lot of temp elements we had to put into place to make sure that all the timing was correct, because those cuts are fast and furious, and because VFX is way down the line, you got to make sure that your picture is going to be just airtight. So basically, I'm doing the picture editing, and then my assistant Jen Rosenthal is helping me, my VFX editor Andy Cohn. He helps, and we come together and try to bring in all the elements. And then I one-on-one work with producers and the notes process until we get to picture lock.
Now, another aspect of that episode 4 that I want to talk about is this framing of Tech Knight doing a true crime episode. And Tech Knight is kind of like Batman the detective. as you will, I think, kind of trying to figure things out or talk it through, but is very much working for the
For Vought. Yeah.
For Vought through the whole thing. Give us a sense of how that episode came together and the conscious decision to frame parts of it as his show.
Great question. That actually came as we were editing. The first part where we introduce him and you see the spoof, I guess, or send up of a true crime show, that was in the script. After we had our first cut done, we realized we needed a little bit more of that. So we had an opportunity with Rufus when he was watching his phone to again do another part so we could really play up this new character who has been talked about but has never been seen. It was fun for me because I started out kind of an unscripted world, so it was pulling out all the old skills I had, looking through stock footage and finding, the wine glass dramatically falling, a body or glasses, and he knew. It's fun. So then we would toss, during the notes process, I'd get a script, and then we'd talk about what kind of visuals would go with that, and then kind of just grab stuff out of the air, because we knew this was the kind of we knew being able to send up a show like that was going to add to his character and add to the menace and the exposure of him, since it's the first time we saw him.
Yeah, it has very like Dateline sort of adjacent kind of vibes to it. I think the Tech Night stuff also has one of my favorite visual jokes in the whole show, which is the one that you do at the towards the very end of the episode, where he's kind of doing his sign off. We already know at this point that he has this weird and random affinity for holes that he likes to essentially stick himself into, and the edit is so clever because it's him and he just looks slightly to the left and you cut to his POV of the hole in the tree. The timing of it is sublime. I mean, it's so perfect. I'm sure it was shortlisted, but bravo, because
it was. The actor was so fun. So if you go back and watch that whole episode again, there are stuff in there. He runs his finger around a glass in this really seductive way. Picks up this tape dispenser and kind of caresses the inside of the tape dispenser. And at one point, and this was my favorite shot in the whole thing, he's having this interaction with Dean Shetty, and he's like, I'm going to throw you under the bus. And at the end of the conversation, he just kind of looks down. He picks up this bagel and he looks at the bagel. And he looks at her and he kind of gives this saucy look and leaves. And you still don't know he likes to have sex with holes. And when you go back and watch that, I'm like, this guy is the best.
Oh my God.
So much.
He was leaving all of the clues.
He was. And same thing when he does and I give a lot of credit again to the actor, just kind of in between kind of darting and seeing the hole. And I'm like, oh, well, this is just too funny.
Yeah, it is brilliant. But in the same episode, I think you also kind of set the tone of the sort of, I think you had already mentioned Sam's sort of schizophrenia, which kind of manifests as a Sesame Street sort of adjacent.
Oh yeah.
There's that great joke about it's character actor Jason Ritter appearing in the Sesame Street sketch.
Television actor Jason Ritter.
Yeah, television actor. Yeah. It was brilliant. But was that also very clearly delineated in the script? They wanted Sesame Street specific, or was that something you guys kind of came up with?
No, that was in the script. And the whole puppet thing starts there, because in the next episode he has the puppet massacre, which is amazing, and then puppet sex with Emma. I mean, the whole puppet thing. So that's kind of the first time we land on the puppet stuff, and we see very genuinely that he doesn't see the world the way everybody else sees it, and that Emma is in. She's full on in there too. She goes, how can I help? What's wrong, and who's this, and what are you hearing? I'm not seeing anything, Sam. How can I help you? Very sweet.
Well, episode 4 is also where the cocksplosion takes place, as we teased earlier. And in the editing of that scene, Maura, tell me how that came together, because again, it's short, it's shocking, but it's got to be really critical that you handle it just right.
One of the things that was really important for that scene specifically was to illustrate how Marie Moreau's powers were more than just blood spears and shards, and that she didn't fully understand the scope of what her powers were or are. And I think all of the season is kind of about that until we get culminated in episode 8. So when we were editing it, we wanted to make sure it was fast because she didn't know what she was doing. So it's a reactionary, much like the explosion of the arm at the end. No, boom, So there's no foreshadowing. This is basically the foreshadow to what's going to happen to Kate in episode 8. Obviously, in the edit room, I wanted more just because how uncomfortable does that look. I definitely got reined in because for me, I just love when people squirm. If I'm not laughing, crying, or squirming at work, it's not worth it. So we wanted to make it fast. And because she gets saved by Jordan, a lot of it was supposed to feel simultaneous, and you can't show all things at once. So knocking on the door, she's like, whoa, we see his penis blow up through the blood. Again, the director had just an amazing shot where you can see Rufus. It's a low angle shot. You see Rufus's face and you see his penis kind of come into frame, and he grabs it. Like, what are you doing? And then practical effect on her with the explosion, she just gets sprayed in the face with blood, which is great because actors that's a natural reaction. She's like, ah! Like that was completely natural. And I think we used the first take on that because I don't think she didn't realize it. She knew it was coming, but I don't know. It's like
you can never really anticipate that.
Yeah, and it was like to me, the whole thing was what happens when a balloon's going to pop, but a lot faster. And as we were talking about female issues before, weirdly justified because he was going to rape her. So it's oddly satisfying. It's horrifying, but also in a weird way, oddly satisfying that she does something to this person who's clearly a violent criminal.
It gives the audience a little bit of freedom, I think, to feel the real comedy of the situation,
Absolutely.
because if he's just some random dude, then obviously you're like, that's scarring, and I know how to feel, but like you feel a little bit more comfortable being like,
you have to take the worst person in the world and have it happen to. Otherwise it's just mean.
And in fact, he seems to bounce back since we see him in, I think, episode 8 as well, right? As he's
but the superheroes, like he gets, what is it, in the second episode, Kate makes him hit himself
with the bat,
right? The bat, this guy's getting hammered.
Like in a scene like that, that's obviously highly emphasizing the sort of visual effect element of it. Is there any sort of practical element to it that they have that you can composite on top of?
Oh yeah, he was obviously wearing a prosthetic, and they had a bladder that they had that could simulate a bubble, but the VFX team made it insanely awesome. I couldn't even have come up with how awesome that looked. Even in my twisted brain, I was like, holy moly, that looked amazing. And once they did get the visual effects in, I'm pretty sure they pared it down even more just because it was so visually aggressive, in a good way. You got it right away. So there was no need to stay on this one cock explosion for too long.
It left an impression.
Yeah.
More turning to episode 8, I want to talk about some specific scenes here as well. But first, there was a rumor in the trades that Gen V was going to be one season, but then got extended when the show was doing so well. Did any of this play out in the editing room, or was a lot of this resolved before it got to you?
I would love to be able to answer that clearly. Because I'm not in those conversations, I don't know. So unfortunately, for any sort of insight into that, I have no idea.
Was there any additional photography that was done in order to set the stage for a second season?
Again, can't really tell you. The script I had, there wasn't any scenes shot after the fact going, oh, we're going to get a season 2. Let's do this. No, what they wrote is what I received as far as editing.
So the final scene of them in the room.
No, they shot it with principal.
They knew that was all part of the principal as far as it came together.
Absolutely. Everything, including Butcher at the end.
Oh, Butcher at the end was also, because I had thought if anything was going to be an addition, I thought that was
all shot in the same. For the entire amount of shooting that we did, everything was shot. There was no extra pickups. In fact, I don't even think we had any pickups after my last day of shooting. I think that was a total wrap on production.
Well, this episode really raises the stakes with new superheroes being released from the woods, new powers. Given that the show has been superhero focused and superpower focused the whole time, how do you up the stakes for that last episode from an editing perspective?
The whole point of the last episode was to make it feel as dangerous as possible, because they wanted to establish this on-campus terror. And so from an editing perspective, even in the beginning scene, we wanted to illustrate how fractured Kate had become, which is why in the very first images you see after the previously on, it's jump cuts and sound effect, the jump cuts and the music to make it feel like she's coming apart. And that she does that one shot where she closes her eyes and she just kind of shuts it out. And now she's ready to do something bad. And it was such episode 7, I was, when I saw it for the first time, I was like, what? They killed it. They slit her own throat. So we wanted to make sure that feeling of dread and what just happened was there. And making sure that because our heroes were going to fracture and half of our heroes were going to go destroy humans, the other half were going to try to save humans, and kind of showing that this is a gray area, right? So we wanted to make sure that we had action purposes for each. So Sam and Kate gone, and then it was really important to go, well, Marie and Emma and Jordan, I guess it's up to us. Everything needs to then converge and feel again like it's happening at once, but all over the place. And then interjecting those heavy emotional moments like Andre with his dad and Emma and Sam in the theater, have them resonate, but not lose the tension of what is happening out on the campus. Because that is where this whole boiling kettle lets loose for steam, and it's chaos. So we did a lot of cross-cutting. We did a lot of cross-cutting with fights. We did a lot of cross-cutting with scenes. We moved a lot of scenes around to make sure that we were maintaining this high level of tension without impacting the emotional moments and the characters that we were trying to tell their story.
What I think is so impressive about a show like Gen V, and particularly what you do in the edit, is it never fails to walk that very specific tightrope of tone, because every given moment is like just a hair away from being either the most high stakes, intense, stressful, violent moment, or a completely satirical parody of the world at large. And there's a moment in this last episode that got me, where you had cut from, you had mentioned it earlier, that scene with Andre and his dad, and it's like this beautiful emotional reconnection, reconciliation for these two characters. And then the very first thing that it cuts to next is a character talking about how they're pissed because they didn't get a farm to table fuck fest that they missed out on. Is that always just very specifically delineated in the actual script, do you think?
No,
or do you feel like you kind of piece those moments together and create that juxtaposition that allows for the comedy?
That's a complex question, because restructuring happens, sometimes it's a happy accident. But I think what Gen V and the boys does insanely well is when you do have dramatic moments, that they're treated like dramatic moments and real. Although some characters like Ashley, who said that line, may be ridiculous, that is also really true to herself. So it's true to her character. So it's not trying to be funny. It's funny. Of course it's supposed to be funny, but it's not trying to be funny. It's staying true to the characters and the characters' voices, but also allowing these characters to have real human emotion. We can do all the funny stuff we want. And, going back to the cock explosion, that's kind of funny, but it's also commenting on a real serious situation and treated seriously. But because of the exaggeration of what can happen, it's funny. So I agree with you. This is one of those shows that is a satire, and satire is so subtle in nature that if you're even a breath off, you go from somebody like television's Jason Ritter to it being stupid,
right?
But because it's weirdly grounded and you feel the real emotion in it, you understand how real those things can be. And I think that's really important when you're editing, is just be true to the characters, and their funny will come out, and the juxtaposition of these things are just natural. I mean, they just happen. It's just going to happen because it is, even if you rearrange these scenes another way, that farm to table fuckfest that Jeffrey and Ina could, if you put it somewhere else, would still be just as funny. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Maura, are there other scenes or small edits that maybe didn't jump out of us, but that you're particularly proud of on either of these episodes?
I will say one of my favorite scenes to cut was the interrogation scene of Marie with Tech Night. It was one of the things that's in a scene like that is so incredible, is the coverage was enormous because we have a classroom, and you have to maintain this tension that he is breaking her, and to make it feel like it's ramping up. So there are very intentional edits in there. You start wide, they feel open, and as the world closes in, you even go into these close-ups that may not be, because the coverage is a circle, there's no real 180 to break. You know the 180 roll, right? There's really no 180 to break, but you can have eye lines that are a little off. But the director got these really intense, like not extreme close-ups, but close-ups of the character where we could pop into those to get the whoa, I'm getting really nervous and I'm about to break moments, and we were able to do that. And then at the end, after the valve is released, we're back to the open of Tech Night going, and that's how you break a witness. Like, this guy's such a dick, and everybody clapping, and so it's that kind of thing that I just think is so much fun when you're editing, especially in a big space, because it can be a little daunting, making sure you're tracking geography, that you're tracking characters, that Dean Shetty's still in there, that you're feeling the weight of this moment, rather than just it being back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So that was an intricate scene, and I really loved doing it. And of course, all the fight scenes are fun. So that's great.
Now, in regards to the fight scenes, though, how much coverage do they normally give you for? Is it they can't go for like hours, just doing the same choreography over and over again? Is it as quick as it seems, or
fight scenes are usually twice as long than you actually see them finished. So they're choreographed. So you have the stunt people, and that's always the big trick, right? Not being able to identify a stunt person. Okay, so you have a stunt person do it, and if there's like wire work, they're flying through the air, stunt people, and then you have the actors go through the motions. So you do get coverage, but it's weirdly cut in half because there are some things you just can't show with the actor, and there's some things you cannot show with the stunt people. So normally what I'll do is I'll cut the entire scene as choreographed, and then you just start to whittle it down until you get the most impactful fight scene that you can have, where it's just like bam, 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 right?
Well, I feel like Gen Z both expanded the world of The Boys, and with some of the things we talked about, is an opportunity for people to maybe an entrance to the world of The Boys as well. Maura, can you tell us anything about where Boys Season 4 or Gen V Season 2 is going to go?
I could, but then Homelander might kill me. I actually don't know.
You can't have that. You have to edit all his close-ups.
I have zero idea where it's going to go. I'm really excited to see where it goes, though. I mean, one of the things that I do love about being on a spinoff that actually hands what could potentially be a plot point of this virus off is really exciting.
Well, we will be watching for more of that. On that note of mystery, we're going to call it a wrap. Maura, really great having you.
Thank you so much. I much appreciate it.
Listeners, I always appreciate your feedback. You'll find my contact info on our website, below-the-line-one-word.biz. That's B-I-Z. You'll also find past episodes and links to all of our social media, so check it out. Maura, where next are we going to see your work?
Well, weirdly enough, I hop genres. So I don't always do superhero work. I don't always do dramatic work, and sometimes I do comedy work. So the next thing that's going to drop for me is a show called Acapulco on Apple Plus, which is in season 3. I did season 1, was unable to do season 2. It's on season 3, and it is a delightful 30-minute bilingual comedy about a young man who works in a hotel in Acapulco in the 1980s. So if you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend checking it out because it is just charming.
Acapulco, there's probably no exploding penises, right? Like that's nice to get away from.
There aren't, but that's what I'm saying. If you were like, oh, I love your Gen V work and went to Acapulco, you'd be like, what? I mean, it is, to me, it's so sweet. It is such a charming show. And if you like 80s music at all, I would absolutely say check out at least episode 1.
Love it. So that's our next episode then. We're just doing that one.
Yeah.
Gianni, remind listeners where they can find the Bad Movies podcast.
Oh, sure. All podcasting platforms, you can listen to the Bad Movies podcast. It's not nearly as scary as you think it is. We don't just talk about only bad movies. A lot of times it's me arguing that, Slaughterhouse is actually not that bad. So if you're interested at all, it is just the Bad Movies podcast. You can get a ticket on any podcasting platform. Yeah, check us out.
My closing credits, thanks to Curtis Five for our music, John Wan for our logo, and to all of our listeners, I appreciate you. Please rate us wherever you get your podcasts. Tell your friends. Thanks again from Below the Line.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if you ever need somebody for your bad movies, I love bad movies.
Oh my God, anytime you want. You just watch the movie and just let me know. Yeah. It's
the bad, the better. Like my husband's like, how do you watch this stuff? I'm like, how do you not?
Yeah, it's so satisfying.